Okay, so before we get into stimulus control and stimulus discrimination, let's review what the SD is. So the SD stands for the discriminative stimulus, and it basically signals that reinforcement is available. So if we think about going through a stop sign, the stop sign is our SD to stop, and it signals that reinforcement is available. If we stop, we can get through the intersection safely. So that's an SD. Another example would be if we think about the Skinner box and a green light signaling that food is available. So that green light is an SD for the rat or the pigeon to press the button in order to have reinforcement of food. An SD in discrete trials is typically referred to as the instruction. So if I said, touch your nose, and you have a history of being reinforced for touching your nose, that SD would be touch your nose. So that's the instruction. So that the SD in a discrete trial is only an SD once reinforcement is established. So if I said touch your nose and you do this and there's no prior history of reinforcement, that's not necessarily an SD, it's just an antecedent. But if there's a history of reinforcement, it becomes an SD. The SD is different than an antecedent. The antecedent is any stimulus that precedes a behavior, whereas the SD signals reinforcement is available. It cues a behavior to occur reliably. So there's a slight difference with that. So hopefully you guys have a clear understanding of the SD at this point. Those are just a couple examples. There's many, many examples. I know Cooper book goes into this in quite a bit of detail as well. So let's go into stimulus control. So the definition here is as follows. The relationship in which an antecedent causes behavior or serves as a cue for the behavior to occur. Repeated occurrences of the behavior depend on its being reinforced. An antecedent that serves as an appropriate cue for occasioning a response and therefore results in reinforcement known as discriminative stimulus. An antecedent that does not serve as an appropriate cue for occasioning a response and therefore does not result in reinforcement is known as an S delta. So stimulus control basically means that we have established a behavior based on a stimulus. So if I said touch your nose, you are always touching your nose, and there's a history of reinforcement involved with that. So we can go right into stimulus discrimination now. Which is the ability to differentiate among different stimuli. So a really good example of this for a lot of the kids that we work with is how old are you versus how are you. A lot of children will mix this up and always say good as a response. So that means they are not able to engage in stimulus discrimination for those two intraverbal questions. Our other examples also deal with intraverbals. As we get more into verbal behavior in the upcoming weeks, this term will become very familiar to you guys. As of now, a really quick definition of intraverbal. It's basically a verbal operant, and it means it's basically just responding to questions, conversational skills. So our example here surrounds intraverbals, and it's the antecedents and trained responses for an example student called Sam. So we're calling this little guy Sam. So you can see here a number of different questions, and he can discriminate the questions, so he's answering them appropriate. So in the first category, we have player personal questions, intraverbal questions. The first one is, what do you like to play? He says, I like games. What color is your hair? It's brown. Where do you sleep? I sleep in my bed. What do you do before sleeping? I read books. Who likes to play with you? Mommy likes playing. Next category here is social. Again, a series of questions. Who are you? I am Sam. How old are you? I'm 4 years old, and so on. I'm not going to read through all of the examples, but basically this is just signaling that he is engaging in stimulus discrimination. He is attending to the antecedent question, and he's responding appropriately. So he is discriminating between all of those intraverbal questions.